The human colony on Rigel 4 was a place of hunger and survival. The soil was harsh, the air was thin, and every meal came from hard labor or imported supplies. People fought for scraps, and only the strongest leaders were respected. Among them stood Commander Varen, a tall man with sharp eyes and a cruel laugh. He was the kind of man who ruled not only with strength, but also with humiliation. He believed mockery was a weapon, and he enjoyed using it on anyone who dared to look weak. In this world lived Dr. Alara, a young scientist with quiet determination. She was not strong with her fists, but strong with her mind. She believed that survival was not about power, but about creation. For months she had worked in the underground lab, experimenting with alien soil. Her dream was simple but dangerous, to grow food that could survive the harsh planet. One evening, after countless failures, her experiment gave birth to something strange. It was a glowing fruit, round and smooth, shining with a faint golden light. Its surface seemed alive, pulsing as if it had a heartbeat. To Alara, it was hope. To others, it was a mystery. She brought the fruit to the colony's meeting hall, where leaders and workers gathered each week. Her hands trembled as she held it up for everyone to see. "This fruit," she said softly, "can grow from Rigel soil. It does not need Earth imports. It may feed us one day." Her words carried hope, but also risk. The hall went silent for a moment, all eyes staring at the glowing fruit. Then a laugh broke the silence. Sharp and cruel, it was Commander Varen. Leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, his voice thundered, "That? That is what you call salvation? A toy with a little light?" The soldiers around him laughed. Slapping each other's shoulders, one of them said, "It looks like a lantern for children." Another shouted, "Maybe we can use it as decoration for the commander's room." The hall roared with laughter. Drowning Alara's soft words, her face burned with shame, but she did not lower the fruit. She stood there, small but unshaken. Varen walked closer, his boots echoing on the steel floor. He pointed at the fruit and sneered, "This is useless, Doctor. You waste your time while real men fight for food." His words cut deep, but Alara's eyes did not flinch. Inside, she felt fire rising. The fruit in her hands pulsed brighter, as if reacting to her anger. For a second, the mocking voices slowed, as people noticed the glow growing stronger. But Varen waved his hand, dismissing it. He leaned close and whispered so only she could hear, "Science will never win respect here. Only fear does." Then he stepped back, raising his voice for all to hear. "Let us thank our doctor for this glowing toy. May it guide us to the bathroom when the lights go out." The hall shook with laughter again. Echoing like thunder, Alara turned and walked away. Her grip tight on the fruit, she did not speak, she did not cry. She only listened. Behind her, the mocking voices followed like shadows. But deep inside, her silence was not weakness. It was the silence of someone planning, someone waiting. She carried the fruit back to her lab, the laughter still ringing in her ears. As she placed it gently on the table, the glow grew brighter. It was almost as if the fruit understood her pain, her anger, and her quiet promise. That night, she stayed in the lab, studying the fruit under dim lights. When she whispered, it pulsed. When she frowned, it flickered. She realized it was not only alive, but listening. It was more than food, more than light. It was something new, something powerful. Her thoughts raced while outside the colony celebrated their commander's cruel humor. She watched the fruit and whispered, "They laughed at you, but they will not laugh for long." The fruit glowed warmly, as if answering her vow. In the dark lab, Alara smiled faintly, the first spark of revenge born inside her. And though no one knew it yet, the colony would one day remember this night, not as the night of laughter, but as the night when silence began to plan. Alara did not sleep that night. The fruit sat on her desk, glowing like a quiet star in the shadows. Its light shifted whenever she moved, as if it was alive. As if it was watching her, she wrote notes, testing its reactions, whispering words, making sounds, even humming. Every time she raised her voice, the glow changed, sometimes brighter, sometimes darker. She tapped her fingers on the desk and the fruit vibrated softly. Like it was answering. It was not just a fruit. It was something else, something with a secret. She leaned closer and spoke. "You hear me? Don't you?" The fruit pulsed once, as if it understood. Her heart raced, excitement mixing with fear. She tried again, whispering, "Anger." The glow turned red, faint but sharp. Then she whispered, "Calm." The glow softened into a warm gold. Her hands trembled. This was no ordinary plant. It was alive in a way science had not explained. It was not only food, it was power. As the night stretched on, she began to test its limits. She locked the lab doors and dimmed the lights. Her voice rose as she pretended to argue. Shouting into the empty room, the fruit shook, its glow bursting across the walls, filling the chamber with trembling light. Then she lowered her voice to a whisper, speaking gently. The glow dimmed until the lab was almost dark. It was responding to emotion, feeding on it, amplifying it. Elara realized it was not only listening but feeding. Her fear made it stronger. Her calm made it softer. Her anger made it dangerous. She paused, the commander's laughter still echoing in her mind. She pictured his cruel smile, his sharp words, his mocking voice. The fruit pulsed violently, glowing brighter than before. The lab filled with a deep humming sound. Vibrating the metal walls, Elara gasped, stepping back. The fruit was not just a tool, it was a weapon. If someone mocked it, if someone feared it, the fruit would grow stronger. And the one who mocked would lose their power. Her lips curled into a small smile. Commander Varen had handed her the perfect key for revenge. Days passed and Elara kept her secret. She acted quiet in public, walking past soldiers who still laughed at her behind her back. But in the lab, her hands worked, her mind raced. She planted more seeds in the alien soil, watching carefully as each sprouted. One by one, more glowing fruits appeared, each small, each innocent-looking. But together, they hummed like a quiet choir. Waiting to be heard, she tested them in groups, learning how their glow merged, how their sound grew louder. They could spread fear like a sickness, a darkness that swallowed courage. The colony thought she was wasting her time, but she knew her time was coming. One evening, she returned from the market. She carried her basket through the narrow steel corridors. Behind her, 2 soldiers whispered, their voices sharp with mockery. She still carries her glowing toys, one said. Maybe she should sell them as night lamps, the other replied. Laughing, Elara ignored them, but her hand tightened around the basket. The fruits inside pulsed faintly, as if they had heard the insult. Her heart skipped. Were they reacting not only to her emotions, but to others as well? She quickened her pace, hiding her smile. The fruits were more powerful than she had guessed. Later that night, she returned to the lab and whispered to them, "You will not only feed on my anger, you will feed on theirs." The glow flared like firelight. The humming filled the air again, soft but sharp. She knew then what she must do. It was not enough to create, not enough to grow. She had to show them all, especially Commander Varen. But not with words, not with speeches, with darkness, with fear, with the secret power no one could laugh at in the colony. Whispers began to spread. People said the doctor worked with strange things in the night. Some claimed they saw lights flickering from under her lab door. Others swore they heard voices. Though she worked alone, fear was growing. Though none admitted it openly, Commander Varen still laughed, still called her Fruit Girl in front of the soldiers. But sometimes, when he passed her, he caught the glow from her basket. For a moment, he felt something cold inside his chest, a shiver he could not explain. He told himself it was nothing. But in the silence of night, his mind returned to that glow. Elara waited, patience hard as steel. Every insult, every laugh was fuel. The fruits listened, the fruits learned. Soon, she promised them. Soon he would enter the dark. And in that darkness, the mocking commander would beg for light. The fruits pulsed, glowing like hungry eyes in the shadows, and the lab echoed with a sound too soft for words, the sound of power waiting to be unleashed. The colony's meeting hall was filled with noise and smoke. Men argued over supplies, women traded for scraps. Children clung to their mothers. But when Commander Varen entered, silence followed him like a shadow. He laughed loudly, slamming his hand on the table. Demanding attention, the soldiers stood taller. The workers lowered their eyes. Varen loved this power, the way fear turned into obedience. Yet across the hall, Dr. Elara stood in silence. Her basket at her side, her face calm, her voice steady. When she spoke, everyone turned to listen. "Commander Varen," she said, her tone sharp but polite. "You laughed at my fruit, you mocked my work, but I believe you are brave enough to test it yourself." The hall stirred. Whispers ran across the room. Varen smirked, his pride flashing like steel. "You want me to taste your glowing toy," he sneered. "Or prove it can feed us." Elara shook her head slowly. "No, Commander, not taste, not eat. I want you to face it." The hall went quiet. the weight of her words pulling at every ear. For the first time, people were curious. Waiting to see the result, Varen puffed his chest. Enjoying the attention. Fine, he boomed. If this makes you happy, I will face your glowing fruit. The crowd cheered. Some laughed. Others whispered nervously. Ilara nodded, her eyes unblinking. Then follow me. She led him through narrow corridors until they reached the sealed chamber beneath her lab. It was a room used for experiments. Walls made of heavy steel. No windows, only one door. The air inside was thick and cold, echoing with silence. The soldiers gathered at the entrance, eager to watch, though none dared step inside. Ilara placed 5 glowing fruits around the chamber. Each one pulsed softly, casting golden light on the steel walls. The glow was warm at first, almost comforting. Varen laughed. This is your test, Doctor, a room with night lamps. He spread his arms wide, his voice bouncing off the walls. Look at me, I fear nothing, not your toys. Not your tricks, the fruits flickered, responding to his mockery, their light sharpening like blades. But the soldiers only laughed with him, unaware of the shift. Ilara closed the heavy steel door with a hiss, sealing him inside. The air seemed to grow heavier at once. The commander turned slowly, staring at the fruits. They began to hum, soft at first. Like distant whispers, Varen frowned, his laugh breaking into a cough. What is this sound? He muttered, stepping closer. The glow of the fruits dimmed suddenly, leaving only shadows behind. The chamber sank into a darkness deeper than night. Outside, the soldiers leaned forward, pressing their ears to the door. Inside, Varen's voice echoed, louder now with a hint of unease. Doctor, your fruit is broken, the light has gone out. But Ilara stood calmly at the control screen. Her hand resting on a switch, she whispered softly, though he could not hear her. It is not broken. It is listening. The fruits glowed again, faint red this time, casting eerie shadows across the floor. Varen spun around, his breath quickening. The hum grew louder, vibrating in his chest like a heartbeat that was not his own. He stepped back, forcing a laugh. Is this your trick, Ilara? To scare me with shadows? But his laugh cracked in the middle, weak and brittle. The darkness thickened again, swallowing the chamber whole. Now there was no glow, no light. Only sound, whispers rising from every corner. The voices spoke words he could not understand, words that twisted inside his head. He reached for the door, slamming his fists against it. But it did not move. Open this door, he roared, his voice echoing back at him. The whispers answered with cruel laughter. Not his own. Ilara watched his panic grow, her face calm but her heart racing. She saw the commander's strength begin to break. The man who mocked her in front of the colony was stumbling in the dark. He shouted curses, kicked the walls. But the fruits only grew stronger. The chamber shook with their hum, the sound crawling under his skin. He tried to cover his ears, but the voices were inside him now. Every insult he had thrown at her, every laugh he had used to hurt others echoed back at him. He was trapped with his own cruelty, multiplied by the fruit. Sweat ran down his face, his hands trembled. His voice cracked. No more. Stop this madness, he cried, though no one answered. He fell to his knees, gasping in the dark. The whispers circled him closer, sharper, louder. He begged, Doctor, enough, I will not mock you again. I will respect your work. The soldiers outside exchanged uneasy glances, hearing his broken cries. This was not the commander they knew. This was a man undone, and the fruits pulsed silently in the dark, feeding on his fear. Ilara's eyes shone in the glow of the screen. She whispered to herself, Now you understand? Commander. Her hand hovered over the switch, deciding how long he must suffer. The power was hers. The fruit's secret was hers, and for the first time, she felt the weight of victory. The chamber was not just a room anymore, it was a stage, and the man who once laughed at her was now nothing more than a frightened actor in the dark. The chamber was no longer silent. It breathed like a living creature, its walls trembling with sound. Commander Varen staggered in the dark, his strong legs weak as if the floor itself pushed against him. The glowing fruits pulsed faintly, like faint eyes watching from hidden corners. He tried to steady his breath, but every inhale felt thick. Every exhale echoed back at him. The chamber had become a trap, not of steel and stone, but of fear itself. Doctor, he shouted, his voice breaking. Enough of this game. But the reply was not Ilara's voice. It was whispers, cold and sharp. The fruits mimicked his own words, repeating them with twisted tones. Enough of this game, they hissed, mocking him the way he once mocked her. His heart hammered in his chest, faster and faster. He swung his fists into the air, trying to strike the voices, but only shadows met his blows outside. The soldiers pressed their ears closer to the door. Some laughed nervously, thinking their commander was playing along, but others frowned, unease crawling into their bones. This was not the sound of a proud leader. It was the sound of a man unraveling. They whispered to each other, asking if they should stop it, but none dared move against Alara, who stood calm, her hand resting near the control screen. Inside, the darkness thickened. Varen could not see his hands in front of his face, yet in that blackness he felt movement. A brush against his shoulder, a shift in the air near his neck. He swung around, his boot scraping the steel floor. "Who is there?" he growled, his voice low and desperate. The fruits pulsed red for a brief second, and the whispering rose to screams. They were not his screams, but they carried his voice. Every fear he had buried now shouted back at him. He remembered his youth, the time he lost a battle, the time he cried when no one watched. The fruits dug into those memories, dragging them into the open. The voices called him weak, coward, pretender. Each insult hit him harder than Alara's words ever could. He fell to his knees, his breath ragged, his chest tight. Sweat poured down his face, dripping into the steel floor below. Alara's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. She watched him crumble piece by piece. Her calm face hid the storm inside her. This was revenge, but also proof. Her creation had power beyond food. Beyond science, it was a weapon of the mind, a mirror that showed people their own fear. And fear, she knew, could break even the strongest. Varen tried to crawl toward the door, his hands scraping against the cold steel. "Open it," he begged, his voice no longer commanding but pleading. His fists hit the door weakly, not with strength but with desperation. The whispers answered again, louder now, mocking his tone. "Open it," they echoed. Until the chamber shook, he clutched his head, trying to block the sound, but the voices were inside him, rattling his skull, poisoning his courage. The soldiers outside shifted nervously. One whispered, "The commander. He sounds broken," another muttered. "This is not right. This is not a test. It is torture." But no one dared touch the door. No one dared challenge Alara. Her eyes glowed with a fire they had never seen. She was no longer the quiet doctor. She was something else, something they could not name. Inside, Varen's fear deepened. The dark pressed close, heavy as stone. He swore he felt hands reaching for him, pulling at his arms, dragging him into nothing. He screamed, but his scream echoed back, twisted and multiplied. The fruits pulsed brighter with every cry. Feeding on his terror, he clawed at the floor, trying to escape what wasn't there. His pride, his arrogance, all stripped away by shadows. Alara finally spoke, her voice soft but sharp, carrying through the intercom. "You said science wins no respect here." "Commander," she whispered. Her words filled the chamber, curling around him like smoke. "Now tell me, does fear respect you?" Varen froze, his chest heaving, his eyes wide though he saw nothing. Her voice was calm, controlled, the voice of someone who no longer bowed. He tried to answer, but only a broken sob left his throat. The soldiers outside stared at each other, their laughter gone. The strongest man they knew was crying in the dark, and the woman they once mocked stood tall, her silence heavier than steel. They began to understand that something had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and it would never return to what it was. Inside the chamber, the commander finally whispered, "Please." The word was small, weak, nothing like the man who once ruled the colony. The fruits pulsed warmly as if satisfied, and Alara closed her eyes, knowing this was only the beginning. Her revenge had started, but the fear had only just begun. The steel chamber was a tomb of sound. The glowing fruits no longer shone gold. They burned red like small suns in the dark. Their hum was no longer soft. It roared like thunder inside the walls. Commander Varen was on his knees, his body trembling, sweat dripping into the floor. His breath came fast and shallow, each inhale choking him, each exhale weaker. He had been the strongest man in the colony, yet now he looked like a child lost in a nightmare. "Alara," he gasped, his voice broken. "Open the door. Let me out." His hands clawed at the steel, leaving bloody smears where his nails tore. The fruits pulsed at his words, repeating them back in twisted whispers. Let me out," the voices hissed, their sound filling every corner. He pressed his hands to his ears, But the whispers slipped inside, crawling through his skull. He sobbed once, quickly trying to swallow it back. But the sound escaped anyway. It echoed off the walls, thrown back at him louder than before. Outside the chamber, the soldiers stood in silence. Their commander's begging reached them through the metal door. Some shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale. One whispered, "This is not our commander, this is someone else," another muttered, "She has broken him." But none dared interfere, for Alara stood near the controls, calm and unblinking. Her face carried no fear, no doubt, only quiet power. Inside, Varen crawled on his hands and knees. The whispers followed him like snakes in the dark. Each time he begged, the fruits grew louder, hungrier. "Please," he sobbed. "I was wrong, I mocked you, I mocked your work. Forgive me." The whispers repeated his confession, twisting it into cruel laughter. I was wrong, they echoed. Mocking his weakness, the sound crushed him further. His pride shattered into dust. Alara finally pressed a button, and her voice filled the chamber. Calm, smooth, like a blade drawn in silence. "You laughed at my fruit, Commander," she said. Her words echoed through the chamber, blending with the whispers. "You called it a toy, a lantern. Useless." Varen sobbed louder, shaking his head though he could not see her. I did, but I was wrong, I was a fool," he cried. The fruits pulsed brighter, feeding on every word. Alara continued, her tone steady. "Tell me again, Commander. Tell me what you are." Her question struck like a whip. Varen froze, choking on his words. I am nothing," he stammered. "I am weak." The whispers seized his voice, repeating, "Weak, weak, weak," until the chamber shook. His sobs turned to screams, but the screams were no longer of anger, only terror. The soldiers outside glanced at each other, their faces pale, their confidence fading. The man they once feared was now begging like a prisoner, and the doctor they once mocked now controlled everything. One soldier whispered, "She holds his soul in her hands," another replied, "and she is not letting go." Inside, Varen crawled back to the door, his voice cracked as he begged, "Alara, please, I will respect your work. I will protect it, I will serve it." He slammed his head gently against the steel, desperate for release. The fruits glowed so bright now that faint red light seeped through the cracks of the door. The soldiers stepped back, fear crawling down their spines. It felt as if the fruits were watching them too, judging them in silence. Alara leaned closer to the screen, her eyes sharp. "You once told me fear rules this colony," she whispered. Her voice cut through his sobs, pulling him lower. "Now tell me, Commander, who rules your fear?" Varen collapsed fully onto the floor, his hands covering his face. "You do," he sobbed. "You rule it. I am nothing without your mercy." His words filled the chamber, swallowed and repeated by the whispers. "You do, you do, you do," the voices hissed. Sealing his defeat, Alara's chest rose with calm breaths. The revenge she had dreamed of was real. The strongest man in the colony was begging at her feet. The soldiers outside would never forget this. Her silence before had been weakness to them, but now her silence was power, power wrapped in fear, power bound to the glowing fruits. She knew the colony's future had changed in that chamber. The commander was no longer the ruler. She was inside. Varen wept in the red light. His body curled like a child, his pride scattered like ashes. He whispered broken promises again and again. "I will never mock you. I will never mock the fruit I will serve. I will obey." The fruits pulsed one final time, their glow steady and satisfied, and Alara, watching from the screen, allowed herself a faint smile. The begging had begun, and it would never be forgotten. The soldiers outside the chamber stood frozen. They had listened to every scream, every sob, every desperate word from their commander, the man who once mocked, who once ruled them with laughter and cruelty, was now broken. They looked at each other with wide eyes, unsure of what they should do. No one moved. No one dared touch the steel door, because Alara stood near it, calm and silent, her face unreadable. Inside, Commander Varen lay on the floor, his body curled, his voice reduced to whispers. The glowing fruits pulsed gently, no longer red with rage but golden with satisfaction. They had fed on his fear until nothing remained of his pride. Every whisper from the fruit was now softer. Almost soothing, the cruel voices had quieted. As if they were done with him, Alara watched him through the control screen, her hands steady, her eyes cold but clear. This was the moment she had waited for, the moment of balance. The one who mocked her had fallen lower than he ever imagined. She pressed the switch and the chamber door slowly hissed open. The soldiers stepped back as steam rolled out into the corridor. Varen crawled forward, his body shaking, his hands trembling. His eyes were red, his face pale, sweat dripping down his jaw. He did not look like a commander anymore. He looked like a man who had stared into something he could not control. The soldiers gasped, their mouths open. Some even whispered prayers under their breath. They had never seen their leader like this. Not even in battle, Alara stepped forward, the glowing fruit in her hands. Its light cast a halo around her face, making her look both human and something more. She said nothing at first, letting the silence weigh heavy. The soldiers shifted nervously, afraid to speak. Even Varen kept his head lowered, his lips trembling. The once proud commander now knelt before the doctor he had mocked. "Look at him," Alara said finally, her voice low but sharp. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. "This is the man who laughed at my work, who called it useless." She held up the fruit, its glow steady and calm. But the fruit heard his mockery, it heard his cruelty. And it answered. She turned her gaze to the soldiers, her eyes unblinking. "Do you still think it is a toy?" No one answered. Their silence was not disrespect, it was fear. They looked at the fruit as if it were alive, as if it might judge them next. Alara let the silence linger, feeding it into their hearts. Then she lowered her hand slowly, letting the fruit hover near the commander's face. The glow painted his tears in gold. Varen shivered, bowing lower, his voice breaking again. "Forgive me, doctor, forgive me, I was blind. I was wrong." The soldiers flinched at his words. Their commander begging in front of them was a sight that shattered everything they knew. Alara's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Not of joy, but of victory," she whispered, just loud enough for them all to hear. "Never mock what you do not understand." Her words echoed in their ears, carried by the humming fruits. It felt less like advice and more like a command. She stepped back, letting the commander crawl out fully into the corridor. He tried to stand, but his legs gave way, forcing him back to his knees. The soldiers did not move to help him. Their fear of the fruit, of the doctor, chained them to silence. Varen looked around at his men, but none met his eyes. They saw not a leader, but a man broken, and they saw Alara standing tall, the fruit glowing in her hands. The balance of power had shifted. It was no longer the commander who ruled by fear. It was the scientist who had mastered fear itself. Her silence was louder than his laughter had ever been, her calmness more powerful than his rage, and the fruits pulsed gently, as if they approved. Alara turned away from him. She walked back toward her lab, the soldiers parting like water before her. No one dared block her path. Her steps were slow, steady, echoing like the sound of judgment behind her. Commander Varen remained on the floor. He did not rise, he did not shout, he did not laugh. The man who once mocked was now too broken to even speak. Inside her lab, Alara placed the fruit back on the table. She whispered softly, "You have shown your power. Now they all know." The fruit pulsed once. Glowing brighter, she touched its surface gently, like one touches the hand of a friend, and she thought of what came next. For her revenge was not only complete, it was only beginning. The colony did not sleep that night. Whispers ran through the steel corridors. Whispers of what they had seen. The commander, the man of iron and cruelty, brought to his knees by a fruit, the doctor, the quiet woman they once mocked, standing taller than them all. Every mouth repeated the story, each version adding more fear. And the fear was not of the commander anymore. It was of Alara and her glowing creations. Commander Varen stayed hidden in his quarters. He no longer marched through the halls with loud laughter. He no longer barked orders or mocked his soldiers. When people saw him, he lowered his eyes, his back bent like an old man. The soldiers who once worshipped his strength now avoided his gaze. They whispered behind him, saying the fruits had stolen his courage. Some even said the chamber had taken his soul. Leaving only a shell, Alara did not seek him out. She did not speak his name again, she did not need to, for the colony had already crowned her without words. When she entered the market, people stepped aside. When she passed through the halls, silence followed her. Even the children who once laughed at her glowing baskets now looked with wide, fearful eyes. Respect had been forced into their hearts, not with fists but with unseen power. Her lab became a place of mystery. No one dared knock on her door. No one dared ask what she created inside. But they all saw the faint light that seeped through the cracks at night. They all heard the low hum that vibrated through the steel walls, and they wondered if the fruits were multiplying, if more glowing eyes were watching them from the shadows. Fear kept them silent, but curiosity burned in their hearts. Inside her lab, Ilara worked without rest. The single fruit had become many, their glow filling the room with shifting colors. Some pulsed in red when touched, others in gold when calm. Together they created a song, a quiet chorus of sound that wrapped around her. She spoke to them like they were alive, whispering her plans, and each time she whispered, they answered with light. It was no longer science alone, it was something beyond, something that blurred the line between creation and control. She thought often of the words Veyron had once spoken. Fear rules this colony, he had said with pride. But now she understood something greater. Fear could break men, but respect born from fear could shape a legacy, and she, Ilara, would shape it not through cruelty, but through the quiet power of the unknown. The colony did not need fists or guns, it needed the fruit, it needed her, the one who could command them one evening. As she placed the fruits carefully in a circle, she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." Her eyes glowed in the reflected light, her voice steady and calm. They mocked me once. They will never mock again. She looked at the chamber where Veyron had begged. Its wall still carried the echo of his broken voice. That chamber had become a symbol, not of fear alone, but of change, of power reborn in new hands outside. The colony slowly began to shift. People spoke less of the commander and more of the doctor. They told their children to never laugh at strange things. They told each other to never mock what they could not explain. And when they saw the faint glow of her fruits through the vents, they lowered their heads, whispering prayers under their breath. It was not worship of Ilara alone, but of the mystery she carried. The fruit was no longer just food or science, it had become legend. Commander Veyron never recovered fully. He avoided the doctor, avoided the fruits, avoided his own men. His laughter never returned, his pride was gone. When he passed through the colony, people no longer feared him, they pitied him. A broken man who had lost to the unknown, and Ilara never spoke of him again, for his silence was her victory. In her lab, more fruits grew, glowing brighter each day. Their hum filled the air like the breath of an army waiting. Ilara stood among them, her hand resting on the first fruit, the one that had started it all. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "They will remember you," she whispered. "They will remember us." The fruits pulsed, their light dancing across the walls. It was a promise, silent but powerful, that the colony would never forget the night of the dark chamber, and that this was only the first step of something far greater.